All right, let's go to that discussion now with Simon Marks. There is growing fury in the United States after a 37-year-old intensive care unit nurse was shot to death by the Border Patrol agents on the streets of Minneapolis on Sunday. The killing of Alex Pretti, an American citizen, has sparked soul-searching within America amid increasingly violent tactics deployed by President Trump's law enforcement agents as they seek to implement mass deportations of illegal immigrants. Mr. Pretti was protesting the Trump administration's policies when he was accosted by the Border Patrol agents as he tried to assist a woman who had been thrown to the ground. The allegation is that he was carrying a pistol for which he had a legal permit. Now, the Trump administration falsely accusing him of quote-unquote brandishing his weapon and is calling the slain man a quote-unquote domestic terrorist. Joining us now to discuss the latest developments in America is our Washington correspondent, Simon Marks. Simon, good evening to you. Thank you very much for your time. There is excruciating weather that is engulfing almost all of America, but the people on the streets of Minneapolis, they're facing a different opponent altogether. Talk to us about the latest victim of the ICE agents.
Yeah, very much so, Xoli. We are in the middle of a literal storm here in Washington, D.C., but a metaphorical storm nationally, and that has been sparked by the killing of 37-year-old intensive care unit nurse Alex Pretti yesterday at the hands of Border Patrol agents, just 17 days after Renee Good, a 37-year-old motorist, like Mr. Pretti, a U.S. citizen, was shot to death at close range by a trigger-happy agent with President Trump's Immigration, Customs and Enforcement Division. There is absolute fury in Minneapolis and across the United States over Mr. Pretti's killing and also over the mendacity, the lies that have been told by top Trump administration officials over the last few hours about what actually occurred on the streets of Minneapolis yesterday, because there are multiple videos that make it abundantly clear what happened. Mr. Pretti's form of protest was to observe and film ICE and Border Patrol operations on the streets of Minneapolis, as he is fully legally entitled to do. And as you were saying, as the Border Patrol agents moved down the street where he was filming them, they pushed another protester to the ground brutally. And Mr. Pretti, who was an intensive care unit nurse, continues filming with one hand, holds his hand up with the other, and turns to try and render assistance to the woman who has been knocked to the ground. At that point, he is assaulted and pummeled by 6 or 7 Border Patrol agents. He was carrying a pistol. He was legally entitled to carry a pistol. He had a permit for the gun. At no point, despite what the Trump administration is claiming, did he brandish that pistol at officers. Indeed, they took it off him. It was removed from him by a Border Patrol agent. As the scuffle continued, they were getting very physical with him at one point, beating him with what looked like it could be a tear gas canister or some other kind of blunt instrument. And then suddenly, Border Patrol agents shoot him dead. All of this being captured on multiple cameras that were trained on the scene by people who were also present, observing the Border Patrol's operations. And this killing, coming off the back of Renee Good's killing, is not a surprise, because Trump administration officials have essentially given Border Patrol and the ICE agents, these masked, thuggish agents of Donald Trump's government, a license to kill. J.D. Vance, in the aftermath of Renee Good's killing, called her death justified. We've seen Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, saying directly to ICE agents and Border Patrol agents, you enjoy full immunity from prosecution for what you do as you carry out your legal law enforcement operations.
Yeah.
So there's no terrible, tremendous surprise about the killing of Mr. Pretti yesterday, and there is tremendous fear about where all of this is heading.
Simon, South Africans watching this are probably very afraid right now, and I'm going to paint a small context for you. A few days after the release of matric results here in South Africa, I interviewed a young man who says he has been accepted at Harvard University. I'm bringing this story in because the mandate of these Border Patrol agents is that of arresting people and conducting what they are saying is the mass deportation of illegal immigrants. Do these people care whether, one, yes, you are an immigrant in America, but do they distinguish whether you are legal or not? Because part of their modus operandi, as I have observed, is they try to listen to your accent, and if it doesn't sound American, you possibly are in trouble. Are they safe, people like South Africans who are in America legally?
No. You are absolutely correct. They are engaging in racial profiling that in an emergency ruling the Supreme Court upheld, and they have even deported American citizens. We've had several cases of American citizens being rounded up, processed, and even while their lawyers were presenting evidence to the US government that they had been born in the United States and had birth certificates, they were nonetheless deported by this administration. Now, Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, denies that that has ever happened. But again, that is false information coming from a Trump cabinet official. And I think that people who are coming here have to be very much on their guard. I mean, we're in a year where America is going to be celebrating its 250th birthday. America is going to be hosting the World Cup. Bafana, of course, making it to those World Cup FIFA championship finals. Their first game gets played in Mexico City, their second one in Atlanta, then they're back to Mexico City. And, of course, there will be South Africans like the young man you referenced who are thinking of coming to study at American universities. And while clearly you are at a much greater risk of being knocked down by a bus than you are of encountering ICE and the Border Patrol, the fact is that these agents are fully funded. There's a budget in excess of $170 billion to pay for their operations. It is evident that the pace of mass deportations is going to increase throughout the rest of this year. And it is completely unpredictable where and when they are suddenly going to sweep through communities, grabbing people, disappearing people. I mean, it's not overly stating it to say that that's what they've been doing, and often not even asking questions later as they deny people rights of due process and remove them from the country. So, look, I don't want to discourage anybody that's got an opportunity to go and study at one of the world's leading educational institutions from traveling to Boston and studying at Harvard or any other university across the United States. But I think you have to be very aware that this is a very different United States now than the one that South Africans may for generations have hoped to study in. And, unpredictability here is now the name of the game.
Simon, let's conclude our conversation with the World Economic Forum. I wonder what the analysis post that gathering is, and I suppose Greenland was front and center when others argue, especially America's allies, that Ukraine and other issues should have probably won the day. What is the sentiment in America post that gathering?
Look, I think it's absolutely evident that the World Economic Forum in Davos marked the death of the transatlantic alliance that has kept the peace in Europe for the last 80 years. And that death knell was sounded verbally and directly by Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney, who made an extraordinary speech to the forum saying that NATO allies, Canada and its European allies, just had to accept that the bargain that had been struck with the United States back in 1949 when NATO was created, that America would provide collective security and those allies would often turn a blind eye to America's breach of international law on the world stage, that those days now had to come to an end because of the unpredictability and the threats that have been made towards America's allies by the Trump administration. So it is a new day for Canada, certainly. We saw President Trump yesterday threatening to impose 100% tariffs on Canada if the government of Prime Minister Carney concludes a trade agreement with China. A big conversation already underway between those two countries. We saw the conversation about Greenland sort of being diverted. I think President Trump has not yet fully understood just how much he was played to stop talking about Greenland and start talking about a very unclear set of arrangements in the Arctic Circle that were being proffered by the Trump whisperer, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and President Volodymyr Zelensky, of course, urging European governments to understand that the United States president is never going to change his mind, and they need to redouble their efforts to support Ukraine as these ongoing peace negotiations take place. They've been taking place this weekend in Abu Dhabi. But, in terms of what we've seen in the transatlantic relationship between the UK, France, Germany, other NATO members, Denmark, of course, and the Trump administration, the alliance is looking as though it is reaching the end of its useful life cycle. And I think all of those governments in Europe particularly are now having to reconsider their relationship with this country because it has become hostile terrain for them. I mean, clearly not as hostile as the terrain that South Africa's government is having to navigate with the Trump administration. But President Trump, in his national security strategy, makes it clear that official US policy is to support the activity of what he calls patriotic political parties in Europe, the far right. He wants to see those parties in government replacing the Keir Starmers and the Emmanuel Macrons and the Friedrich Merzes. And the World Economic Forum was really the beginning, I think, of that campaign.
Simon Marks, thank you very much. Wrapping up the political scene on the world stage for us very neatly there. Simon Marks live for us in Washington.